Hi, Steve here at Big Pond Kayaks. Just wanted to have a little chat about the Surge Play. Um, there's not many reviews online about it with the Surge Play other than what I've done myself. So I'm trying to give some honest feedback about the kayak, how it works, what you can expect from the kayak. So yeah, let's get started. So looking at the back of the kayak, one thing that you're going to notice is the profile. So the kayak has got a lot of rocker, which is mostly emphasized on the back end. So most kayaks would the hull would be down here. It'd be a bit more flatter at the back, which helps with like tracking and all that sort of stuff. But it's just a more traditional shape of kayak. Whereas with the Surge Play, I've gone with a full rocker, as much as I could possibly put on it without it drastically affecting the performance. Um, so when it comes to performance, what was I trying to achieve with the Surge Play? So we have a lot of dramatic water around the Isle of Man. It's constantly windy. We're constantly on tide races. We're constantly in a flow of some sort. We get a very short window for slack tide. So depending on the time of day you're out, depending on the tide, you're always going to get some sort of a wind on tide. You're always going to get some flow around headlands. So yeah, I wanted to create a kayak where you could actually stay quite close to the coastline, so not as such as rock hopping as such, because it's not a plastic boat. It's not really built for rock hopping, but it's designed to have a bit of fun in these sorts of conditions. So one thing I've noticed with this hull shape, especially with the rocker and the back end being swept up, you have a bit more control over the kayak and what it's doing. So if you're in clapotic water, I think I've said that the right clapotic, rebounding water. So you've got water that's rebounding all of the time, and you've got the shape of the hull. You've got your low center of gravity, so you're a bit lower into the bottom of the rocker of the boat, which makes the boat a lot more stable. You've got the soft chines on the sides, so in that water where it's going all over, it's coming backwards, forwards, lifting you up, dropping you down, the boat is going to stay stable. So all the water is going to move around you like this, and the boat's just going to stay stable. So it's a massive confidence boost in them sort of conditions. Um, Again, the feedback I've had from people is um, when they're in them sort of dramatic conditions, it's a confidence boost. It makes them feel like they have the ability to be in that place, in that dramatic water. So yeah, so moving on from there, we've got the middle of the kayak here. Oh, sorry, just talking about the back deck. It's a very low back deck. There's not much girth, if as such, if that's the right word to use. But again, what happens when you have a rocker on a kayak? The other weather conditions can affect you. So if you've got some side wind or anything like that, kayaks that have a lot of rocker or a flat bottom or anything tend to get affected by the wind in a way that you don't want it to. So keep the back deck low, keeps it out of the wind. So you'll find that again in dramatic water, the wind sort of catches the tops of the waves as it blows over the top of the kayak, and it'll ignore the kayak, if you will. So even in flat water conditions, when you've got wind that's blowing from the side, it'll just ignore the kayak and just go over the back. So you don't get that effect of the wind weathercocking. Now, I know weathercocking can act, you can have some advantage over weathercocking in the way that you use your kayak. But for this kayak with the rocker on the hull, having that low back deck, keeping it out of the wind, dropping it down, really does benefit the kayak. So I tend to say it doesn't weathercock in bad weather. It really doesn't. You do have the skeg on this kayak. So the skeg lever's here, and that can drop down. So you can see the skeg there, just drop down nicely. Again, use the skeg that you would do in any normal sea kayak. It works exactly the same, but with this kayak having the rocker that it has, if you want it to feel like a normal touring kayak, all you need to do is just leave it down a little bit. So let's have a look. So that's all you need, just a tiny little bit of skeg, and that'll just put the bit I chopped off the boat basically to make this hull shape, puts it back on by just dropping the skeg down a little bit. So I'm not saying it's heavily reliant on the skeg. You can paddle this boat without the skeg, but if you're used to paddling touring boats that have a, you know, that extended uh, rear, the way you would normally see a kayak, you know, that's the square shape on the back. Trying to explain it in vague terms, that skeg will just put that shape back in place. So I like that because when you do lift the skeg up, it gives you full control of the boat. I mean, I've been in dramatic water myself, and I've needed to turn around, and I've been in a group, and you'll find everyone's comfortable going in one direction, and then all of a sudden you've got to change direction and go back. And that's where this is brilliant. You just lift the skeg up, and you'll be able to turn quicker than all the rest of the group. Once you turn around, just drop the skeg down a little bit. That's what I love about this boat. So again, it takes a little bit of practice, but if you're in a tide race or you're surfing, say you've surfed into the beach and you want to go out and have another go, you just lift the skeg up completely. You'll turn around super fast, and you can go back out again. And just so play around with the skeg in these. It really does help the hull shape, playing with that skeg and finding that sweet spot that you're comfortable with. Right, so we're going to move around to the cockpit area now. So it has got a nice big cockpit rim already. I've not really come across anybody that's had any problems. It is a standard size, so there's not really much to say about that. With this kayak, one thing I notice about your average sea kayak is that they drop the rim here, you know, just underneath where your spray deck fits underneath the rim. There tends to be an indent where it just goes down inside, and what that produces is a bigger surface area for the rim to fit to when you're building a kayak. And all it means is that the rim isn't just really high up off the deck, so it drops it down just to incorporate lowering that deck rim. Now I've not done it too much on this kayak. I've kept, if you can see it, it's I've left it up. You know, there is a little bit of an indent because I do need a good bit of purchase on the deck when I fix the rip. But what I've found is that when you go to put your knees and your thighs underneath the deck here on the keyhole shape, that'll just get in the way. It'll dig in. What can happen is with that, you'll start to lose blood circulation. You're cutting off blood circulation to, you know, parts of your knee, and you'll end up with dead legs, or you'll end up with pins and needles or something like that. You know, so keeping that deck underneath here as smooth as possible, taking all the ridges away. Helps in combating all that and it's just a bit more comfortable. Also, because you've got that flatter uh, inside to the deck. You can customize it yourself, so you can add padding on there quite easily. You can add shaped padding, so you've got like more of a thigh hook going on and things like that. I actually sell some thigh hooks that you can actually fix to these, which will really hold you into the kayak. They're a bit disconcerting to most people. I don't like them. I'm big enough in the kayak to just be comfortable in there without that. But that's another feature really that I paid a bit of attention to, which again, on longer trips, and especially in an active boat like this where you're going to be in active water, being a bit more comfortable on your knees and keeping the blood supply going to your legs is quite important. The seat can be changed. There's not really much to say about the seat other than it's quite comfortable. I make my own backrest. One thing I do is I make a fiberglass back to it, and then I put a foam front to it, which is quite rigid. Because what I've found is with most kayaks available out there, the backrest, if anything, is just going to fall apart, and you'll end up making do or just ignoring that you've got a backrest really. So keeping something that's really either customizable, so you can customize it, or just having it the way I do, keeping it simple tends to work. But that's an item that can be customized, different sizes, different shapes. If you have any back problems, I can sort out, you know, back problems, so changing the seat, using a flatter seat, different sizes of backrest. So going forward again, the Skeg slider is just here basically. There's never a good place. There's no, you'll never find the most best place to put a Skeg slider. But I put it in a place on the boat where it's easy to access really fastly. So if you're in dramatic water, you're paddling away, you want to turn round on a wave or something and go back, you can literally just flick it up or flick it down, and you grab hold of your paddle again. So I'm not having it where you're having to reach far, because otherwise you'll end up not using your Skeg to its best advantage, if you will, if you're finding that you have to lean forward to reach for the Skeg slider. So I always put it quite local, which is around this side part of the cockpit, so it's fully accessible. So we'll move forward a little bit. So again, the the hull shape on this is where the seat is. It's the lowest point of the rocker, which again helps with stability. The stability on this kayak is absolutely bomb-proof. I honestly can say, if you're in this boat, you're not going to be capsizing. I know that's a bold claim, but honestly, this is probably one of the most stable kayaks I've ever been in, which is again a, a massive bonus to you if you're in dramatic water, tide races, all that sort of stuff. You want that feeling that it's actually a stable kayak and it's going to look after you, which this does. Really is a bomb-proof, stable kayak. When you roll in this kayak, because of the low volume of the deck, when you're upside down, there's not a load of kayak out of the water that you've got to turn. So again, having that low volume helps roll in the kayak. There's soft chines on the side and all that sort of stuff, and this kayak becomes even more buoyant on its side, on its edge. So because of the shape of the kayak, so as you come into turn, it'll actually help you up a little bit. Or your hip flick will actually, as soon as you get to the point where your hip flick's going, it'll want to go. It'll want to right itself and get back onto its hull. So there's a couple of added features that I put into it as well. Just moving forward here a little bit, I've kept the deck lines out of the way because everybody knows knots and deck lines. When you're in an active kayak, you're just going to hit your knuckles on them. So I've kept this part of the deck quite clear. So if you are paddling and you brash the kayak with your knuckles, you're not going to hurt yourself or anything like that. Where on a lot of kayaks, when you pull the deck fixings back here, you're just hitting the knots all the time and the ropes, which can really annoy or prevent hinder your paddling a little bit. So yeah, on the hull here, it has got a quite a pronounced V shape on the hull. So I basically, with the kayak having a lot of rocker, I introduced quite a dramatic V shape on the hull, which helps with tracking basically. So as you're entering the water, you're displacing the water either side of the kayak rather than underneath the kayak. So it moves the water out of the way, which makes it stable because as you're moving the water out of the way, there's pressure on either side of the kayak, which keeps it stable. So the faster you go in this kayak, either you're surfing or you're in moving water, which the water's moving underneath of you, it's going to track a lot better with that V shape on the hull. So it helps again with adding so much rocker onto the kayak, which is the general banana shape of it. Putting the V shape really does help that tracking on the water, stability on the water. So as your kayak might go to a point where you're thinking you're going to be out of control, it'll keep you in control. It'll look after you a little bit better with having that V shape. If I was just to have put a flatter hull on it, you get the problems with weathercocking. You get problems with the water pressure going directly underneath the kayak and making you unstable. So the V shape just helps all that really. It's quite an important part of this kayak, and the V shape comes forward and gets to a point where it's actually slicing the water tension again, the surface tension of the water. So that's really quite important as well. So on the front deck, I've kept this again quite simple. Most of you are going to put a set of some split paddles on the deck. So I'll put them in a place where it really is easy to put some split paddles on here. Um, they fit quite nicely over the top of the hatch. You know, they're not. It's not awkward being on the deck, and it's in a place where, again, if you're in moving water, tide races, and all that sort of stuff, um, the paddles are sort of in keeping with the deck shape. So, you know, the pressure of water running over the deck or something is not going to wash them off. Or, you know, I've seen loads of videos of people in tide races where they have a set of splits on there and they go through a few waves, and before you know it, the paddles are sticking all over the place. And they've got to readjust them or they lose one. So, you know, the emphasis on lots of bungee on the front end, you know, and again, holding it nicely. You know, there's lots of perches for putting split paddles on, and again, out of the way of your hands, so they're within reach, but they're far enough away. So if you're doing some really big sweeps in tide races, you're not going to be cracking your knuckles on them. So again, it's little advantages like that that you wouldn't really think about. Um, let's move a little bit further forward now. The front hatch is the biggest hatch that you've got. So although I did make this boat for um, playability, you know, having some fun in tide races, moving water and all that sort of stuff, you can use it as a weekend boat. You can go camping. So this is great. I've been on multi-day trips in this, and I know a few other people that do camping trips in it as well. Put all your lightweight gear in the front. So the front will take all your sleeping bags, your tent, um, your spare clothes, shoes, all that sort of stuff. You can literally fill the front of it up with all that sort of stuff. There's actually quite a lot of room in there. It's not limited at all. It's what you would imagine to be on the front of a kayak. The back bit is a bit different because we've got this um, low back deck. Um, there's not as much room, but what I tend to do is stick my tent poles in the back, and then the hatch here, I would put some heavier, um, so all your food sachets and stuff like that, safety equipment, and you know, so and then behind the cockpit here, in this hatch, put all your food, your heavy stuff like any bottles of water, put them in the bottom of the V shape. So and then stack it up with all your heavy food. Um, so yeah, you can it's more than capable of going away for the weekend with a couple of days worth of food. It's actually quite fun, and it's actually quite fun having. Everybody knows that the more you load a boat up, the more stable it becomes. But you don't really need to worry about that with this kayak. It'll actually take a lot of weight with the displacement on the hull. I mean, I'm pushing just over 17 stone, and I put kayaking stuff in it, and I'll still enter into all the tide races and move in water and stuff and have some fun, you know. So, where you'll tend to see that a lot of people, if you're out in the group with people that have got touring kayaks, they tend to be in a straight line still. You know, the boat's loaded up with gear. They tend to not want to go into moving water and active water with a full heavy boat, because it does start to change you know, the feel of the boat. Where this one stays playful. If anything, you don't need as much skeg if you've got a boat full of camping gear. So again, moving forward onto the front of the deck. Now, again, with it being an active boat, one of the things I wanted with this boat was when a kayak starts to, I call it purling. You know, like you do that duck dive where the front end just disappears under the water and you end up popping backwards. You know, you'll see it so many times, or you'll see kayaks go up on end and then the wave will just take them over. This kayak doesn't do that. So what happens is, so when you enter some surf or some wave and you get that force of water pushing you forward, with the hull shape that I've got on the front, it'll actually want to push the kayak up and out of the water. So if anything, you can overtake the wave that you're on. So you might want to slow yourself down a little bit. But when you're hitting that water, the front of the kayak will lift up. Now, on a lot of touring kayaks, that will still happen. But the problem is the back end, because the back end is quite pronounced and it's stuck inside the wave, it'll still overpower the back end will still overpower the front and pearl it'll try and send you down into the water. That's why we've got this sweeping back, so that it's lifting the buoyancy out of the water. So the back of the kayak is staying in level with the wave, if you will. So even if you're on a wave, the kayak is mirroring the shape of the wave. There's hardly there's not a lot of pressure on the back of the wave. The pressure is more on the middle of the kayak where you're surfing. So you'll find rather than the power of the wave pushing you from this area and taking control of your boat, it'll tend to push from the middle section, which gives you a hell of a lot more control. You'll find that you'll be able to turn the kayak from left to right on waves, and just have that more control because the back end isn't trapped in that wave, in that foam or whatever's going on behind it that you can't really see. So it frees up the front to be a bit more active. So what'll happen is the front will lift up. So rather than it diving down into the water, it'll push itself up, and it's free to do that because nothing's keeping it, you know, diving down. So that's again the hull shape resembles the shape of the wave that you're on, the swell, and it helps keep that front end up out of the water. So you'll see the V shape. You can literally cup your hands on the front of the kayak with the V shape, and it's got that lovely shape to it like this. So the pressure of water hitting the front of it lifts it up out of the water. Now, let's say you're on a big enough wave that you're still going to duck dive. I'm keeping the deck really quite simple. I've not got any compass recesses or anything like that. The deck is actually quite flat. So when the water does get onto it, it disperses. Um, a lot of touring kayaks, try and combat that by putting a slight V on top of the kayak. So when it does enter the water, it sheds the water. But I don't know. I've got this theory, same as the hull shape. If you just keep things simple, let the hull do the work, and keep the deck really, really simple. That's all you need to do, basically. So there's no real point in putting a V shape on top of and on top. But all it's going to do is bring it higher up out of the water. The V shape will bring you into weathercocking and all that sort of stuff. So keeping that deck flat, simple at the front, quite low profile, keeps you out of the wind, side winds, and all this sort of stuff. And if there's pressure, as in waves coming over the deck, they're just going to disperse really quickly because it's got that flatter hull, flatter deck to it. Rather than you having so much kayak out of the water, basically. So yeah, that's where I am. That's where the design came from with the Surge. It's 15.5 foot long. It's 23 inches wide, and it's low profile. There is a couple of extras that I'm doing on this now, and for people with longer legs, I've moved the cockpit rim back 2 inches, which means you can move the seat back 2 inches, and I've moved the front of the cockpit forward 3 inches, which gives another 5 inches of play. So if people with longer legs, again, can lift their feet. They're not getting the toes hooked on the front, and you're not having to either lift your torso out of the kayak before your feet. You can actually it's just going to help you get your feet out first, really. While you and again, the self-rescuing. So if you're off on the back deck, you want to be able to just drop your bum into the seat. So I've made it slightly wider as well for wider hips. So you can just slot yourself into the seat. You can keep control of your paddle while you're putting your legs back into the kayak. So what else? All the components from start to finish on the kayak are all Kayak Sport from Finland, which I think they are the leading component manufacturers for sea kayaks. So there's the Skeg slider, the hatches and hatch rims, and deck fittings and feet pegs are all from the same place. So getting replacements for anything like that is quite handy as well. So the other thing we've got here is a sweetie hatch. Now there's a few different options with the sweetie hatch. If you have small feet, you're better off with what is in this kayak, which is a very long sweetie hatch. It goes all the way through to the front bulkhead, and that means that you can put a lot of your safety equipment in there and still have room for your sweets, basically, and snacks and stuff like that. You can fit a bottle of water in there as well, like a small bottle of Coke, something like that, or water. That will fit in there, and you can still have room for your safety gear. So I recommend put everything in a dry bag. It is quite dry in these, but stick your safety gear, your flares, and all that sort of stuff down the back. You can still reach it, but it just gives you a bit more room then. Or if you have bigger feet and you want a little bit more room, you like to drop your feet off the feet pegs and have a stretch out. I can just put a bowl in there, just a simple bowl, which will hold your sweets and little snacks or your camera or car keys, whatever you need to put in there. Really, it doesn't have to be a big one, so you've got a bit more room for moving your feet around. So yeah, a lot of thought has gone into this kayak, and it does things that you're not expecting a normal sea kayak to do. Uh, so jumping in a normal uh, touring sea kayak, this is going to feel a lot different. It might not do some stuff that a touring sea kayak would do. So if you're expecting to go off on real long journeys like ocean crossings and all this sort of stuff, probably best not doing it in this. There's other disciplines of kayak, but this is basically solving a lot of problems that most touring kayaks have. So if you're taking a touring kayak, which most of the kayaks out there are touring kayaks. So if you're taking a touring kayak into dramatic water, capotic water, rebounding water, uh, tide races and surf, and all the problems that you will get with a touring kayak that you just put up with, I've solved on this kayak. By sweeping up the bow and the stern, keeping it low volume, giving it lots of rocker, giving it lots of edge, and there's a lot of emphasis these days in putting hard chines onto kayaks. And when soon as you put a hard chine on a kayak, it limits some of its capabilities. It pushes it to have more of a flat full shape, which introduces things like weathercocking and all that sort of stuff. So you can go too far with playing around with active hulls. So I believe on this model, what I wanted to achieve was the smooth chines, soft chines, which is just going to make it a nicer kayak to paddle on your trip. I mean, I'll go as far as to say is um, a lot of touring kayaks that you get out there. Say if you're out for 6 hours paddling, how much of that time would you spend in tide races? Probably not a lot. It's too tiring. You can't stay in a tide race for 6 hours and still have the energy for a trip and do some miles. So let's say on average, if you've got the day to go kayaking, you're going to probably stay out 4 to 6 hours. You probably want to integrate that kayaking trip into some tide races, moving waters. You're going to hit some headlands, and you want to be comfortable. And you've only got a set amount of energy. So if you also want to do, say, 15 to 20 miles in that trip as well, you're going to be in a. So being in a kayak like this will help you out for the day's paddling. It's not just going to be one trick pony. So sometimes putting some hard chines on there may help you carve in a tide race. It may help you track in some different sorts of moving waters and all that sort of stuff when you're on edge. But once you've finished doing that, you've got the rest of the day still paddling. So this is why I went for the soft chines. I think it's just a better option for what this kayak needed, and for the hull shape to keep that lovely rocker that a lot of kayaks claim to have, but they don't have. If you can have a look at the rocker that this kayak has, look at where the shadow's hitting on the hull shape. So I've got some lovely rocker. I've got a nice V-shaped hull. It's just soft chines. It just all works together really nicely. without compromise. So you're just going to be able to go out for a full day's paddling and actually enjoy it and not come back too spent. You know, it'll build your confidence. So after being in all the tide races and moving water, you're going to come back and think to yourself, oh, I really enjoyed that. I want to do it again, rather than what most people do, come back and say, I survived that and I'm knackered. I need a week off to recover. So this is where we are with this kayak. That's what it's designed for. It's designed to have a play in. It's designed to go out for the full day, not be too exhausted, and to enjoy everything that you come across. And that being going in and out of caves, staying closer to the coastline, just having a really good play around in all the features that you come across with confidence. That's where we are. Surge play.